Prime Minister Anthony Albanese defends his dealings with China over an incident last week where an Australian diver was injured by a Chinese vessel. Optus boss Kelly Bayer Rosmarin finally resigns, and the World Cup cricket final, which Australia won, drew 57 million viewers in India alone. Welcome to Fear and Greed Business News, Australia's best business podcast. It is Tuesday, the 21st of November, 2023. I'm Michael Thompson, and good morning, Sean Aylmer.
Good morning, Michael.
Now, after the show, Sean, a very, very topical interview today. You're speaking with Carden Calder, who is the co-founder of financial communication firm Blue Chip Communication, which is, of course, a terrific supporter of this podcast. And the subject matter is one that we're actually going to be talking about throughout the show today.
Yeah, it's all about crisis management. What do you do when your company is hit by a crisis? Now, obviously, Optus has been in the news a little. Kelly Bayer Rosmarin resigning yesterday. We talk about Optus. In fact, we talk about a bunch of companies and kind of the first thing they should do when they're hit by a crisis and how that feeds through into the media, how companies should react. It's a really, really interesting chat with Carden. And it's not just for big business, it's for all businesses.
Yeah, Carden knows this space so well. And the fact that you actually ask her, okay, what happens when you are running a small business and something goes wrong? How do you apply these principles to that? It is a must listen for everyone, basically. It's well worth sticking around for. It's up a little bit later on. The main story this morning, though, Sean, Prime Minister Anthony Albanese was out and about yesterday after what seems like weeks of travel, first to the US and then to China and the Pacific Islands. He criticised Chinese forces for injuring Australian divers in international waters a week ago, saying they were dangerous, unsafe and unprofessional.
It's a very fine line for Albanese at the moment, treating the relationship with China. He said yesterday that China's aware of Australia's anger over the incident, though he wouldn't say how they became aware of Australia's annoyance or whether he brought it up with Xi Jinping on the sidelines of the APEC meeting last week. He said the incident in which a diver suffered an injury from a Chinese destroyer's use of its active sonar shows the importance of communication guardrails between nations and of military-to-military communication. When asked, Mr Albanese said he wouldn't provide details of how he conveyed his view, rather saying it was through normal channels, whatever they are. The Prime Minister also rejected suggestions that the government had failed to protect Australians after it released 84 people from detention earlier this month, following a High Court ruling that indefinite detention is unconstitutional.
He's under a little bit of pressure, isn't he, over the communications with China and to try and essentially just reveal kind of how those communications were held, whether it was a phone call directly to the president or whether it was just kind of through diplomatic back channels and all of that. There's just not a lot of transparency there.
No, and Kevin Rudd came out and said, not that he has anything to do with Australia's relationship with China, he's got a lot to do with Australia's relationship with America. He came out and said, look, we don't talk about private conversations between leaders. That's kind of what Albanese said yesterday, but we're not sure that he had a private conversation with Xi Jinping about it. So that's where he's getting caught up a little bit.
And it runs the risk then of kind of shifting the focus of the substance over it, where people are just asking questions about the communications and not actually talking about the substance of our relationship with China.
Yeah, and I mean, the fact that these divers were injured because they were diving so close to a Chinese vessel in international waters in itself is a worry. That's actually what we should be talking about, not quite how the message got across.
Yeah, indeed. Staying in Canberra, Sean, 2.5 million small businesses will get access to cyber health checks and one-on-one assistance during cyber attacks under new plans announced by Home Affairs Minister Claire O'Neil.
The government wants to combat the growing trend of criminal groups exploiting vulnerable supply chains to attack bigger prizes. Basically, the move's aimed at fixing insecurity among the 97% of businesses classified as small. Most of them do not have the time or resources to properly plan for cybersecurity incidents, but participate in critical supply chains. The plan, which comes into effect next year, comes ahead of the imminent release of the Albanese government's long-awaited cybersecurity strategy. I think I've been saying imminent release for quite a while now when we come to that cybersecurity strategy.
And we finally have it. You've got to say, though, Sean, it would be enormously reassuring for small businesses to hear that about the one-on-one assistance during cyber attacks, because that would be the most alarming part of it, not knowing who to speak to and how to actually get assistance when you need it.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think it's a great idea because that's when small business needs it most, is in the moment to actually have someone to ring. Good option.
Yeah, indeed. All right, local markets, how do they perform yesterday?
The S&P ASX 200 closed up just a touch to 7,058 points. It wasn't a classic day of highs and lows. Basically, the bourse traded in a narrow 30-point range. The banks were generally better, led by Commonwealth Bank and National Australia Bank. The energy stocks, Woodside and Santos, both jumped more than 1%, while Aristocrat Leisure closed up 2%. The miners were mixed, so to the retailers, James Hardie and REA outperformed. Newmont, the old Newcrest, and Brambles underperformed. A bunch of miners did best. Coronado Global, Karoon Energy, Allcom, Paladin Energy, they were the top 4 performers. Star Entertainment Group was among the worst performers, down 4.5%. Something of note, ahead of Thursday's vote on the Brookfield EIG bid for Origin Energy, the largest shareholder, Australian Super, who of course opposes the deal, lifted its stake in the company to 17%. Yesterday, Origin Chair Scott Perkins said there won't be any knee-jerk reaction or radical reassessment of the group's structure if the vote fails. Clearly, Michael, he has been thinking about it.
Yeah, sounds like it. And Sean, can I ask you a question without notice? I know this is your favourite kind of question. You mentioned before Newmont underperforming, and a lot of this happened while I was away on holiday, so I'm sorry if I'm repeating something that you talked about at the time. Before I left, I know that Newcrest was going to delist from the ASX. I didn't realise then that Newmont listed in its place in what is that, a dual listing then between here and Wall Street?
Yeah, it is. It's a scrip for scrip offer, which means, Australians want to hold Australian shares, not necessarily US shares. Mm-hmm. So it kind of forced Newmont to list on the ASX.
Okay. All right. There you go. What's happening in international markets?
Brent crude prices have risen a bit over the past 24 hours. They have been on the way down for a few weeks now. Gold is down just a touch. The Aussie dollar is trading around 65.5 US cents, and that's because the US dollar is hovering around 11-week lows. That's against a basket of currencies, with the US Federal Reserve expected to keep interest rates on hold next month, and plenty of speculation that the next move in rates might actually be down. The greenback is coming under some pressure and the Aussie dollar is benefiting.
Okay, we'll be back in a moment with the rest of the day's business news. Sean, Optus boss Kelly Bayer Rosmarin has resigned following the mass outage that hit its network on November 8, last year's cyber attack, and a less than convincing performance at a Senate inquiry last Friday.
Parent company Singtel announced the departure yesterday morning, and Chief Financial Officer Michael Venter will become interim CEO. Ms. Bayer Rosmarin has held the top job at Optus since April 2020. In a statement, she said that having had some time to reflect, she had made the decision to resign in the best interests of Optus going forward. Prime Minister Anthony Albanese went on to tell Sky News the CEO has resigned. That, of course, is not surprising given the circumstances which are there.
Of course, Sean, there'd be plenty of speculation now as to who will take her place long term, and I suppose one of the names that would be put out there would be Gladys Berejiklian, the former New South Wales Premier, who is one of the top executives at Optus, but just don't know whether they would go for someone internally or someone externally, considering the problems that the network has had.
Yes, there was already talk about that. There was talk within hours of Rosmarin resigning that Gladys Berejiklian was the obvious person for the job. Not that many state premiers have gone on to actually run organisations. So Baird was one who was a New South Wales Premier, a Liberal Premier who went to National Australia Bank, but he didn't ever get the top job, for example. I'm just trying to remember. There's a couple of West Australian Premiers who kind of went into corporate life but didn't kind of make it beyond senior executive level. In fact, I'm not sure that anyone has.
It would be a very, very quick rise to the top, wouldn't it? Because you would think that, of course, Gladys Berejiklian performed at the highest level within New South Wales politics and led the state through a very tough time in terms of the pandemic. But to go from that to running a very large company in a very, very high stress, very demanding, very technical sector, it might just be too soon.
Yeah, I mean, I think that politicians tend to spend years in politics, not in business. So I'm not sure that politicians make great business people. I think that's kind of the bottom line. That's no reflection on Gladys Berejiklian. I have no idea how she's going at Optus, but generally I just don't think the two mix that well.
Now, Sean, this is a good one. Bunnings is pushing into the $5 billion home cleaning market, meaning soon that with your soil and barbecues and wall tiles, you'll be able to buy everything from laundry detergent to dishwashing tablets, paper towels and cleaners, everything.
Everything you could possibly need. As Bunnings puts it, the hardware chain wants to sell everything from the front gate to the back fence. The expanded move into cleaning and selling popular cleaning products in bulk at low prices will be a direct challenge to market heavyweights Woolies and Coles, as well as places like Costco. Earlier in the year, Bunnings launched a new and expanded pet offering. Bunnings boss Mike Schneider said the retailer was riding the wave of demand for cleaning products, which occurred during the pandemic. Research said the behaviours have been maintained. They want to take advantage of it.
The Australian Security Exchange has hired Indian giant Tata Consultancy to design a replacement for its share settlement and clearing infrastructure. This is a year after its previous effort to replace the system was abandoned, and that was pretty disastrous, wasn't it?
Michael, I can see you almost yawning as you were saying that, and then you came through at the end.
Well, I mean, it was quite wordy, but I mean, the fact is the chest replacement system, that whole thing was just, it was a disaster. And there were headlines and headlines galore when there should be so much stability, and instead there wasn't.
That's right. I mean, you need some really big systems to do all that trading of securities on the ASX. In fact, there's millions of trades a day, and you need something that can do that. The current system's old, 29 years old. It's supposed to have been replaced by now by a blockchain-based system. That's the one you were talking about. That failed, and regulators have been very wary of the ASX Limited ever since. Yesterday, the company said it's opted for a product-based solution, and the first release of the system will cost, somewhere between $105 and $120 million. That's to be completed by 2026. The second phase will be done hopefully by 2030. Regulators will be watching this one closely.
Now, how about the scale of this one, Sean? The local boss of Japanese gas giant Inpex says Australia's deteriorating policy climate for gas threatens future investments to support its $45 billion LNG project in Darwin.
Yeah, $45 billion. It's big. Tetsu Murayama said the retrospective application of new rules to sanctioned gas projects was of great concern to INPEX's leadership, given the investments required to support the potentially 40-year future of the LNG project. Now, that project near Darwin is Japan's biggest overseas investment. According to the Financial Review, INPEX is separately gearing up for a big increase in spending on renewables to advance Australia's 2030 emissions reduction target. Mr. Murayama also called for regulatory changes to provide more clarity and certainty for offshore gas projects, pointing to the legal challenges that have overturned approvals for work at Santos's near $6 billion Barossa gas project in the Timor Sea. There's also the Woodside Energy's $16.5 billion Scarborough venture in Western Australia. In short, INPEX wants certainty.
Yeah, and Inpex wasn't the only resource company complaining about policy certainty. Yesterday, Sean, BHP warned again that Australia's position as the world's premier mining destination is threatened by the looming industrial relations overhauls and increases as well in state government mining royalties.
In a report entitled Recapturing Australia's Competitiveness, BHP argues that Australia could almost double its annual critical minerals investment pipeline to $19 billion if governments enact policies to streamline the approvals process and deliver globally competitive regulatory settings. Australia still is the largest mining exporter by value. In fact, we're more than twice the size of the second largest, which is the USA. We have very much broken out of the pack over the past 2 decades, but BHP warns that sudden and unilateral changes in tax and royalty regimes, think Queensland a few months ago, those sorts of decisions put future investment at risk.
The Mining and Energy Union will split from the CFMEU by next week after the federal court set down a withdrawal date more than 2 years after the miners made the decision to do so.
Members voted to break away in 2021 following a fallout with the dominant construction division and bullying allegations over Victorian boss John Setka's campaign to unseat then CFMEU National Secretary Michael O'Connor. Now, that came to a head when O'Connor didn't publicly support Setka over charges of harassing his wife. In a statement yesterday, the MEU, that's the Mining and Energy Union, part of the CFMEU, said working through the legal complexities and challenges of withdrawing from our 1992 amalgamation has been a lengthy and resource-intensive process. We're pleased that this process has now come to an end, and from December 1, the Mining and Energy Union will become Australia's newest union.
And finally, Sean, congratulations to the Australian cricket team for their win in the World Cup yesterday. The game lured 57 million viewers in India. That's a record. And when you think about it, Sean, that is twice the total population of Australia watching just in India.
Yeah, incredible. The game was played at probably the world's biggest stadium in front of the Prime Minister of India, Narendra Modi. The stadium's actually named after. It's called the Narendra Modi Stadium. There were Bollywood stars there, about 130,000 spectators, depending on who you're listening to or reading, somewhere between 100 and 130,000 spectators on the day, many of them wearing blue. Disney Hotstar said viewership peaked at 57 million, though it did fall away as Australia looked like winning the game, according to a report on Bloomberg. Cricket's becoming very, very big business thanks to its popularity in India. The Board of Control for Cricket in India has become one of the richest sporting bodies in the world. The IPL, the Indian Premier League, it's worth around 10 billion Aussie dollars. Big business cricket in India, at least. Maybe not so much in Australia. While talking sport, another code which is growing in popularity overseas, though not so much in Australia, is rugby union. Its chairman, Hamish McLennan, was ousted over the weekend. Yesterday, he said it would simply create more division. Now, that is a sport in trouble.
Sean, how about the fact that the stadium is named after Narendra Modi and he was there attending it? Can you imagine naming a stadium in Australia after someone who is still in power? It would be like renaming the MCG Anthony Albanese Arena.
Yes. I think I'm right when I say this, but when Albanese was in India earlier in the year, he and Narendra Modi went to the stadium, went to a game, and that, I think, was when they unveiled the name Narendra Modi Stadium. And if you remember, I think it was Albanese saying it, or one of his minders saying, to go somewhere with Narendra Modi, and he's like a hero.
Yeah. It's like a rock star reception.
Yeah, totally. Very different to Australia. I just can't, what the MCG becomes the AAG? I don't think so.
No, I like the Anthony Albanese Arena. I think it rolls off the tongue, the AAA.
Yeah. Yep. I like it.
All right, now in international news, Argentina elected libertarian outsider Javier Milei as its new president yesterday, Australian time, rolling the dice really on an outsider with radical views to fix an economy battered by triple-digit inflation, a looming recession, and rising poverty. He's going to have his hands full.
I love this story. So official results show Milei with near 56% of vote versus 44% for his rival, according to Reuters. Milei is pledging economic shock therapy. His plans, Michael, include shutting the central bank, ditching the peso, and slashing spending. Potentially painful reforms that seem to resonate with voters angry at the economic malaise in the country. He's got plenty to do. The country's broke. Inflation's at about 150%. It has all sorts of rules around the use of capital, which means using capital is really tough. Mr. Milei's win shakes up Argentina's political landscape and economic roadmap, no doubt about that. It could impact trade in grains, lithium, hydrocarbons. Obviously, that's something where Australia's interested. Milei has criticised China and Brazil, saying he won't deal with communists, but he does like the US. It's going to be fun to watch this one.
Can you imagine one of your key policies, your key economic policies being to shut the central bank?
Yeah. No, I can't imagine it. Let's hope it works out.
Now, an update on a story we talked about yesterday, Sean. OpenAI's board has hired former Twitch chief Emmett Shear as chief executive officer, defying calls from investors, including Microsoft, to reinstate the ousted Sam Altman.
Yes, this story just gets better and better and better. So Shear stepped down as CEO of Amazon's game streaming site Twitch earlier this year. And apparently he won over OpenAI's directors, who made him CEO, because he appeared to recognise the existential threats that AI presents, according to a report on Bloomberg. A computer scientist who spent more than a decade building Twitch into one of the world's most successful video platforms, she is regarded as having the heft to lead a large engineering group. That's good. Just as importantly, she has ties to the AI Skeptical Effective Altruism movement.
Rolls off the tongue, doesn't it?
How's that for an acronym? AI Skeptical Effective Altruism movement, which sees risks posed by advanced AI. Many effective altruists, which is a pseudo-philosophical movement that seeks to donate money to head off existential risks, have imagined scenarios in which a powerful AI system could be used to create serious and widespread harm. Now, Altman was fired on Friday without the blessing of largest investor Microsoft. Part of the reason, media suggest, is that he didn't care enough about the dangerous side of AI. So the new CEO certainly is someone who does care about it, given that he's involved in the AI skeptical, effective altruism movement. Whew, what a story.
That is a heck of a story, Sean. Let's see where this one goes. All right, up next is the Fear and Greed business interview. You are speaking with Carden Calder, co-founder of financial communication firm Blue Chip Communication.
Yes, all about what to do in a crisis. Crisis management for companies, not just big companies, but small companies as well. And we get into the Optus issue. Now, we spoke to Carden before Kelly Bayer Rosmarin stepped down, but we actually do talk about how Optus did respond to the outage the other week.
Yeah, indeed. It's more how it was dealt with on the day, isn't it? And a really good guide as well for small business as well, how to deal with events when things go a little bit pear-shaped. It's coming up next in the Fear and Greed playlist on your podcast platform or at fearandgreed.com.au. Thank you, Sean.
Thank you, Michael.
It is Tuesday, the 21st of November, 2023. Make sure you're following the podcast and please join us online on LinkedIn, Instagram, X and Facebook. I'm Michael Thompson and that was Fear and Greed Business News. Have a great day.